Dear students of class 12, very pleasant good morning to you all. Hope all of you have done your exam very well. Dear students, today I am here with our short story number 9, Sound Machine, part 3. Part 3. Part 3. I have already completed 2 classes. This is the third part, and we are from page number 106 to 109 pages. We will be learning pages 106, 110. This is what we are going to learn today. You may remember that in our previous class, how our Klusner was trying or experimenting to listen the inaudible voices that is happening around. According to his theory, you have to remember the theory, there are high-pitched sounds which our ears are not able to listen, or if the pitch is so high, we are not able to hear them, or if the pitch is too low, then we are not able to hear them. And according to his theory, there are sounds that we can listen, and through the machine, our Klusner was making an experiment, and as he was trying with his machine, he saw his neighbor, that is Mrs. Sanders, coming to her garden and cutting the roses. The moment she cut the rose with scissors, she could hear a painful cry, shrieking sound, and he could not understand from where it was coming. And finally, what he did, he asked Mrs. Sanders to cut one more rose, and he listened. The exact moment she cut the rose, there was a severe cry, painful cry from the rose plant. That is what he said. And hearing this one, he stopped. All right, he said, that is enough. No more, please, no more. Perhaps why our Klusner said that one? Because the sound which he heard was so painful, so tragic cry of a rose plant. That is the reason. Okay, from there on page number 106, middle point onwards, the woman stood there, a yellow rose in one hand, clippers in the other, looking at him. I am going to tell you something, Mrs. Sanders, he said, something that you won't believe. He put his hands on the top of the fence and peered at her intently through his thick spectacles, very carefully looking at Mrs. Sanders. You have this evening cut a basket full of roses. You have with a sharp pair of scissors cut through the stems of living things, and each rose that you cut screamed in the most terrible way. When you cut the rose, each rose cried in its most terrible way. Did you know that, Mrs. Sanders? No, she said, I certainly didn't know that. No, I did not know that. It happens to be true, he said. He was breathing rather rapidly, but he was trying to control his excitement. I heard them shrieking. Each time you cut one, I heard the cry of pain, a very high-pitched sound, approximately 132,000 vibrations a second. You couldn't possibly have heard it yourself, but I heard it. Klusner is telling, the moment you cut the rose, I could hear the pitiable cry from the rose plant. Did you really, Mr. Klusner? She decided she would make a dash for the house in about 5 seconds. She thought of running to hers. You might say, he went on, that a rose bush has no nerve system to feel with, no throat to cry with? You would be right. It hasn't, no like ours anyway. But how do you know, Mrs. Sanders? And here he leaned far over the fence and spoke in a fierce whisper. How do you know that a rose bush doesn't feel as much pain when someone cuts its stem in two as you would feel if someone cut your wrist off with a garden shears? How do you know that? It's alive, isn't it? It is alive. Yes, Mr. Klusner, oh yes, and good night. Quickly she turned and ran up the garden to her house. Klusner went back to the table. He put on the earphones and stood for a while listening. He could still hear the faint crackling sound and the humming noise of the machine, but nothing more. Now, the experiment is over. The lady has gone back to her house, but he could hear no more sound of the painful cry of a plant, except the sound of machine. He bent down and took hold of a small white daisy growing on the lawn. He bent down to pluck a daisy flower, a white daisy growing on the lawn. He took it between thumb and finger like this, and slowly pulled it upward and sideways until the stem broke. He pulled up and sideways, and he pulled until the stem broke. From the moment that he started pulling to the moment when the stem broke, he distinctly heard in the earphones a faint, high-pitched cry, curiously inanimate. The moment he lifted or raised the daisy plant and turned to sideways and lifted until it broke, he could hear the cry. He took another daisy and did it again. Once more he heard the cry, but he wasn't so sure now that it expressed pain. The plant, the daisy plant, when he plucked again, it made some sound, but he could not really analyze whether it was a painful cry or not. No, it wasn't pain, it was surprise, or was it? It didn't really express any of the feelings or emotions known to a human being. It was just a cry, a neutral, stony cry, a single emotionless note expressing nothing. It made some sound. Definitely it made some sound, and Klusner is not sure whether this cry was just a painful cry or expression of any other emotions. It had been the same with the roses. He had been wrong in calling it a cry of pain. It was almost same with he had been wrong in calling it a cry or pain. A flower probably didn't feel pain. It felt something else which we don't know about, something called toin or spur or plinkment or anything you like. Some kind of sound, some kind of agony, pain it made. That means what our Klusner is trying to prove. When we pluck out something or cut a living organism, a plant, a flower and so on, it makes some kind of sound. It makes some kind of sound, but definitely don't know what is that particular sound. On page number 108, let us see. He stood up and removed the earphones. It was getting dark and he could see pricks of light shining in the windows of the houses all around him. Carefully he picked up the black box from the table, carried it into the shed and put it on the workbench. Then he went out, locked the door behind him and walked up to the house. So after the experiment of day 1, our Klusner in the evening, late in the evening, took the machine back to his workshop and placed it on the bench and returned to his house. The next morning, Klusner was up as soon as it was light. He dressed and went straight to the shed. He picked up the machine and carried it outside, clasping it to his chest with both hands, walking instantly under its weight. He went past the house, out through the front gate and across the road to the park. Now this time our Klusner is going to do day 2. He took his machine and he is walking to the park, maybe to do a bigger or better experiment. There he paused and looked around him. Then he went on until he came to a large tree, a beech tree, and he placed the machine on the ground close to the trunk of the tree. Quickly he went back to the house and got an axe from the coal cellar and he carried it across the road into the park. He put the axe on the ground beside the tree. Then he looked around him again, peering nervously through his thick glasses in every direction. There was no one about. It was 6 in the morning. So it was morning time and there was nobody. He put the earphones on his head and switched on the machine. He listened for a moment to the faint, familiar humming sound. Then he picked up the axe, took a stance with his legs wide apart and swung the axe as hard as he could at the base of the tree trunk. So finally he hit Kuladi se maar diya. The blade cut deep into the wood and stuck there. At the instant of impact, he heard a most extraordinary noise in the earphones. And the moment he struck the axe on the trunk of the tree, he could hear some extraordinary, a different kind of sound in his earphone. It was a new noise, unlike any he had heard before, a harsh, noteless, enormous noise, a growling, low-pitched screaming sound, not quick and short like the noise of the roses, but drawn out like a sob lasting for fully a minute. Almost for a moment, for a minute, he could listen that sound. Loudest at the moment when the axe struck, fading gradually fainter and fainter until it was gone. Klusner stared in horror at the place where the blade of the axe had sunk into the wood flesh of the tree. Then gently he took the axe handle, worked the blade loose and threw the thing on the ground. After removing the axe from the trunk of the tree, he threw it on the ground. With his fingers, he touched the gash that the axe had made on the wood. So gash means the wound, that is cut mark. Yes, gash that the axe had made in the wood. Touching the edges of the gash, trying to press them together to close the wound, and he kept saying, "Tree, oh tree, I am sorry, I am so sorry, but it will heal fine." So he was almost trying to press the gash of the wound or the opened cut mark and tightening together, feeling very much pain. Why he is doing all these things? Because he could really hear the pitiable or the most painful cry that is made from the tree. So And really, our listener felt really sorry for the painful cry of the tree that was caused by his cut. Tree, oh tree, I am sorry, I am so sorry, but it will heal fine. For a while he stood there with his hands upon the trunk of the great tree. Then suddenly he turned away and hurried off out of the park across the road through the front gate and back into the house, leaving the machine at the axe, everything. He rushed back to his house. Let us see for what purpose. He went to the telephone, consulted the book, dialed a number and waited. He held the receiver tightly in his left hand and tapped the table impatiently with his right. He heard the telephone buzzing at the other end, and then the click of a lifted receiver and a man's voice, a sleepy voice saying, "Hello, yes, Dr. Scott," he said. "Yes, speaking." Dr. Scott, you know, his family doctor. Whose family doctor? Mr. Klusner's, yes. "Dr. Scott, you must come at once, quickly, please." "Who is it speaking?" "Klusner here, and you remember what I told you last night about my experience with sound and how I hoped I might." "Yes, yes, of course, but what is the matter? Are you ill?" "No, I am not ill, but—" "It is 6:30 in the morning," the doctor said, "and you call me, but you are not ill." "It is just 6:30, 6:30 in the morning, and you say you are not ill. Then what is the matter?" "Please come quickly. I want someone to hear it. Please come quickly. I want someone to hear it." So probably why our Klusner is calling our Dr. Scott. He is called because Klusner wanted to make Dr. Scott to listen the pitiable cry that is made by the tree through another experiment. The same cry which he heard, he wants to make others also listen. "Please come quickly. I want someone to hear it. It is driving me mad. I can't believe it. It is making me crazy." The doctor heard the frantic, almost hysterical note in the man's voice. Hysterical, nervous, yes, crazy. The same note he was used to hearing in the voices of people who called up and said, "There has been an accident. Come quickly," he said slowly. "You really want me to get out of bed and come over now?" Doctor is again confirming. "Do you want me to get up from the bed and come right now?" "Yes, now, at once, please." "All right, then I will come." Klusner, yes, what is our page number? Okay, page number 110, as I told. "All right, then I will come." So doctor finally agreed to call up our Klusner. Klusner sat down beside the telephone and waited. He tried to remember what the shriek of the tree had sounded like, but he couldn't. He could remember only that it had been enormous and frightful, and that it had made him feel sick with horror. He tried to imagine what sort of noise a human would make if he had to stand anchored to the ground while someone deliberately swung a small sharp thing at his leg so that the blade cut in deep and wedged itself in the cut. Some sort of noise, perhaps. No, quite indifferent. Our Klusner is just imagining what would happen if the same situation happened to a human person, what type of painful cry that the person would make. And he feels no, quite different type of cry. The noise of the tree was worse than any non-human noise because of that frightening, toneless, throatless quality. Throatless, toneless, frightening quality of the sound that is made by the cut of the tree. He began to wonder about other living things, and he thought immediately of a field of wheat standing up straight and yellow and alive, with the mower going through it, cutting the stems. 500 stems a second, every second. Oh my God, what would that noise be like? 500 wheat plants screaming together, and every second another 500 being cut and screaming. And no, he thought, I do not want to go to a wheat field with my machine. He told, no, I don't want to go to a wheat field to listen this sound. Already after the experiment, our Klusner is feeling so much uncomfortable in his mind by hearing the cry of rose plants, daisy plant, and of course the cry of the trunk of the tree. Now, those were the single cries. Now, in a second, 500, 600 plants cutting at a time. And what a terrible cry that would be. I would never eat bread after that. No. After listening the cry, I won't be able to eat the wheat. But what about potatoes and cabbages and carrots and onions? And what about apples? Oh no. Apples are all right. They fall off naturally when they are ripe. Apples are all right if you let them fall off instead of tearing them from the tree branch. Our Klusner finds it difficult to eat any item that is coming from the plant or trees. And now he feels okay with apple, only you can eat them after they naturally fall down. If you tear or pluck it forcefully, then definitely that apple also would make so much painful cry. Yes. But not vegetables, not a potato for example. A potato would surely shriek. So would a carrot and an onion and a cabbage. So he feels he is not going to eat any of those vegetables after listening the painful cry. He heard the click of the front gate latch, and he jumped up and went out and saw the tall doctor coming down the path, a little black bag in hand. Well, the doctor said, well, what is all the trouble? Come with me, doctor. I want you to hear it. I called you because you are the only one I have told. It's over the road in the park. Will you come now? Yes. The doctor looked at him. He seemed calmer now. His legs. There was no sign of madness or hysteria. He was merely disturbed and excited. Yes, dear students, here we stop. Let me remind you about the class. Today we have learned from pages 106 to 110. In fact, page number 11, the top, and our story, Sound Machine, part number 3, written by Roald Dahl, characters, Klusner and this Dr. Scott, and what he was trying. So, in our class, today we learned the experiment, day 1 experiment and day 2 experiment. Day 1 experiment, of course, with the first day's experiment, that was with the rose garden, where Mr. Klusner asked our Mrs. Sanders to cut the rose and he recorded the sound. Then he himself plucked one daisy from the lawn and he heard the sound. Then the next day morning, he took the machine to the park near his house and made a cut on the trunk of a tree with his axe, and he heard the sound, and he became very much panic, and he called his Dr. Scott, and finally Dr. Scott arrived, and slowly he is taking, Mr. Klusner is taking Dr. Scott to the park to listen what he heard from the tree. All right, thank you very much. Today we stop here, and we probably we will complete our class tomorrow. All right, you take care. Please listen the video and learn. Thank you very much.